Hey, it's Stu with Bitcoin and financial independence. It's been quite a while since I put out an episode back in the spring or beginning of summer, somewhere back there. And I did the same thing this last summer. And I guess going forward, this is just to be expected because I've got small kids. My wife and I both work from home. And it just makes putting an episode out really tough when I'm home with kids all day trying to work during summer. Uh, I've also come back a little bit later than last year because I'm recovering from a small medical procedure that slowed me down for a few weeks, but getting healed up from that and doing a lot better now. And I also had a strong catalyst that pushed me to get here in my closet and push out another episode. The motivation was really high. I was kind of frustrated, just a weird situation. So we're going to talk about that today. And of course, there's so many interesting things that have happened in finance and the Bitcoin space in the last few months over the summer that I've missed that you can hear somewhere else from Trump, RFK, and Vivek Ramaswamy, Senator Lummis speaking at Bitcoin conference in July, and all the stuff with the yen carry trade exploding a bit and some stock market volatility, Bitcoin volatility. And there's lots of other sources you can hear all that stuff on. But today I wanted to share the story of me blowing up book club, kicking a hornet's nest, and I guess the way my wife put it was riding a Trojan horse into book club. For a bit of context, I work out with a men's group that has locations nationwide and even outside the United States. It's called F3, which stands for Faith, Fellowship, and Fitness. But it's pretty big in the area where I live, and it's just free men's workouts early in the morning. We all coordinate and chat via Slack, planning different workouts. There's different hangouts for fellowshipping, just having friends really in the area. There's all sorts of activities in Slack that are planned, and all sorts of projects that are shared and hobbies, from woodworking to cycling. There's classifieds, there's job postings, music. I made an investing channel. Most of the time, it's pretty dead, and me posting about Bitcoin. But I've got a gold bug in there too, and we go back and forth, have a lot of fun talking about everything going on. He speaks the exact same language as me, pretty much, and we watch all the same things going on in the economy. So it's awesome to just have his perspective as well. But today, we're going to talk about what's going on in book club. So we just finished a self-help book about personality types, about enneagrams. There's these 9 personality types that most people slot into, it seems like. And we just talked about all that sort of stuff as personality changes over time, uh, experiences in childhood, nature versus nurture, all these things that affect personality. So it's kind of a self-help book just to raise awareness about yourself and the people that you're around so that you can keep your mental health in check and just know that you're functioning in a healthy way, and shows you some of your weaknesses that you're prone to and stuff. So it was an interesting self-help book. Although I didn't really enjoy it. It was all right, but it was not my favorite. In the last year, we've read several books. One was a historical fiction called Peach Blossom Spring. It's about a lady from China that flees communism and goes to Taiwan. I never would have chose that book, but I really enjoyed it. It was good. There was another book suggested by Neil Gaiman called The Ocean at the End of the Lane. It was a fantasy book, and again, I never would have picked that up of my own accord, but I enjoyed it so much that I read 2 more books by the same author. At the same time, there was a couple of books that I skipped, either because I was busy, they didn't interest me, stuff like that. One that I'm gonna go back and read on my own was called Marching Powder, which is about this British Tanzanian man who, basically was arrested running cocaine across a border or something like that, in Bolivia at an airport. And so it all sounds like super interesting stuff. That's some of the things that they've done in the last year. They've had biographies, more historical books, historical fictions, stuff like that. There was even a joke about doing a romance novel a while ago, and so they did the joke. They chose a Harlequin romance novel. I passed on that, but they did the joke. It was fun for those guys, I guess. But anyway, we did that, and so I was kind of called out with a couple other people that, hey, maybe this person, or this person might be due for leading the next book selection. And so how it usually works is the person that gets to choose will throw out, we'll say 3 to 5 different book options that they're interested in, and then the group will vote on those options. So I've been waiting for this moment for about a year and a half. There are books that I've put off, several books that I've put off reading that I would really, really like to read, in hopes that I would get to choose them for book club at some point. And so now is my time. to do this. And there's a lot of Bitcoin books out there in the world, obviously. We know that. Most people don't. But my goal was not to choose something that's in your face Bitcoin, but rather something that I would call Bitcoin adjacent. So I went through this long list of books that I had on my list to read, and I posted this message in our Slack channel. I said I had a heck of a time whittling down my list and at the same time trying to choose something that would be different and interesting. I'm a bit of a finance and economics nerd, and these are high on my list, highly rated, and also all of them are available on Audible. So the four books I chose were The Fourth Turning by William Strauss and Neil Howe. The second book was Check Your Financial Privilege by Alex Gladstein. He's the chief strategy officer of the Human Rights Foundation. Broken Money was my next choice by Lynn Alden, and then The Lords of Easy Money by Christopher Leonard. So I made that post and I waited, and we had just all had lunch. It was a kind of a lazy, it's the end of the week, short week because of Labor Day. It's a Friday afternoon, and everyone had just met, so like book club was on everyone's mind, and we know we're picking a next book and all that stuff. So, but just a quick note on these books. Fourth Turning is more of like a theory of history and how American society goes through these cycles. If you've ever heard the saying or seen the meme, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. That quote kind of ties into these different cycles, these four turnings. So there's turning 1, 2, 3, and 4, these four stages that society goes through. And it's basically the idea that we are on the fourth turning where weak men are creating hard times. We've got inflation, we've got all these hard times going on from weak men. So that's the first choice I did. Check Your Financial Privilege. This is the most in your face Bitcoin book, and I didn't really realize that at the time. Um, but the subtitle is, quote, Inside the Global Bitcoin Revolution. Okay. There's even a Bitcoin symbol on the cover. But I had read Alex Gladstein's other book more recently, Hidden Repression, and he explains complex things so simply and easily and told so many great stories that I expected this would be a pretty easy read. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I mentioned that in my post that this is the Human Rights Foundation Chief Strategy Officer. So maybe people just didn't really get that one. But anyway, the next option was Broken Money by Lynn Alden. She's a well known macro economics analyst, and I've waited a long time to read this book because I really want to read it. I think it's pretty similar to Bitcoin Standard, which don't judge me, but I have read it a third of the way through and I still haven't finished it. But Bitcoin Standard is really like 90% history and 10% Bitcoin is the solution or the best money. Uh, from what I gather, I haven't read all of the book yet, but I think Broken Money is kind of the same thing. It's just history of money, history of economies, stuff like that, history of society through time and how Bitcoin can maybe help society more. So the last book I chose was The Lords of Easy Money, which is about the 2008 Great Financial Crisis. And it will not talk about Bitcoin directly, but it would at least paint this problem with dollars, with inflation, with the Federal Reserve, and it would open that door for that type of discussion about how do we deal with these problems. So, like I said, we just had met, had lunch, discussed this other book, and we know the new picks are coming. I post these, and I get crickets for a couple of hours. No one's voting, no one's commenting at all. This is a pretty engaged group, like I said. And I finally get this direct message from a guy in the group, and I met him briefly, and I couldn't put a face to the name exactly. And also, everyone, it's kind of confusing. We all have nicknames in F3, and I'm going to protect even his nickname, but we're going to call him Mac. So he sent me this direct message saying that he enjoyed meeting me at book club today. He says, I love the book recommendations, but have gotten some private feedback that some of the others may not be as much into finance or want to read up on the subject. We've had some wide ranging books and all sorts of topics covered, but to keep participation growing, would you mind tossing out a few choices that are a little less technical and perhaps something that would be a little easier to read? They respond well to fiction, and we usually get a good showing for that. Maybe put out one or two fiction options. So I mull on this message for a little bit because I'm not a big fiction reader. I will say I am reading some Brandon Sanderson, and I've read more fiction in the last 2 years than I've read in my life because I don't choose fiction books except for maybe high school where I had to for some classes. But I'm not a big fiction reader. I read nonfiction. I read self help. I read psychology, history, biographies, and finance and economics. But the thing is that I don't have any fiction books on my radar. There's nothing that I want to read that's fiction right now. So I just respond and I say, no, I'm going to pass rather than put out fiction options. And I can post that in the group chat too. I skipped a couple books because they didn't interest me, right? So I've skipped some books in book club because they didn't fit what I was looking for. And I've taken a risk on others. But this guy, Mac, he keeps on going. He suggests that I post some Michael Lewis books. And he says more technical books are just a tough sell for guys not into that interest. Something introductory, parentheses, and fun or narrative based would be good, or fiction based on finance. See, now this is a good point, but I didn't want to choose a book that I had already read. That's usually discouraged in book club. You're not supposed to pick some of your favorite books or books that you already read. Kind of the point is to read something new. And I unfortunately had already read The Atlas Maneuver, which was kind of meh in my mind. But I've also read Nathaniel Popper's Digital Gold, and that was a really good book that really dove into some of the people behind Bitcoin in the early days, some of the interesting characters like Charlie Shrem and Ross Ulbricht, stuff like that. It was really a very entertaining read. But again, I've already read it, so I'm just thinking, no, not really. So I responded and I said this quote, my angle is actually trying to go Bitcoin adjacent, not just normal finance, but also not in your face Bitcoin. And then I kind of detailed over these books like I did for you guys, telling him like Broken Money is probably the most technical. The others are shorter, but I don't think they're as bad as they sound. Like The Lords of Easy Money, I haven't read it, but I don't think it's that bad. People might think of The Creature from Jekyll Island, which I read as well. Um, it's about banking systems and central banks. It's kind of a boring topic. Most people would look at it and be like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not really interested in that. But it was actually a pretty fun listen. It was a pretty fun read. So it was not as bad as I even thought. It was not as dry. It was more entertaining than I thought. And I expected this as well because these books are all very highly rated. So I said to him, why don't I just let someone else take it? I'm standing by my picks. And if the men don't want to be challenged to read what they normally wouldn't, they can move on. And then I said I'd throw out a couple more options, but if they don't land, again, someone else can take the lead on this. So I threw out this other book called The Swiss, the Gold, and the Dead: How Swiss Bankers Helped Finance the Nazi War Machine. Second option that I threw out was Life After Google: The Fall of Big Data and the Rise of the Blockchain Economy. And so I just thought these sounded kind of interesting because most men, I think, have a natural draw to like a World War II. Just kind of knowing your audience, just Nazi war machine financing sounds interesting, right? Lots of intrigue and stuff. So that's what I was hoping for. And then Life After Google, I just think, regardless of the subtitle being about big data and blockchain and stuff, which also kind of gets into altcoins, which I don't love, but it would be very interesting to explore the idea of life after Google. I toss those out there, and again, I get a message from this Mac guy. He says, quote, I'm sorry, this is my bad. I should have reached out privately before this to let you know kind of what they look for. The secret is accessibility. Make it something that a general interest would want to read. So I respond saying, don't feel bad. I'm not mad. I am a bit annoyed, but I get it. I gotta say that I find it comical that a group of men that like to challenge themselves and have read a Harlequin romance novel are intimidated by finance books. I guess I thought that men would be more interested in finance because typically we are the providers of our families. I don't care what the group is looking for. I thought the point was to read stuff you normally wouldn't read. But if the group is looking for certain things and I don't fit that bill, then someone else should take it. I thought this was something different though, but it seems like I'm wrong. So I kind of use that message to Mac, and I go back to the group and I post these. And I posted these two other books. Like I said, all right, maybe there's no interest in these options that I listed. Here's two more titles that interested me. If no one wants to read these, someone else could take the cue. No hard feelings. But I will just say that as a man, and usually the provider in the home, I think that these are important subjects. This is just my opinion, especially in the world we live in now. I thought the whole point of book club was to read something you normally wouldn't. These are the types of books I enjoy. I think many of you would be surprised by them, and I think I will too. I haven't read any of them. At the same time, I skipped Flashman and a couple other books that didn't interest me. But I really enjoyed this other guy's pick, the Neil Gaiman book, and never would have chose to read that. I read two more of his books later. I never would have picked Peach Blossom Spring, and that was one of my favorite books that I read in this book club. It was a great read. Someone else take it if it suits the group better. Guess I wanted to challenge y'all in a different way than, and I named the guy that did the Harlequin romance novel, but I wanted to challenge you in a different way than him. No hard feelings either way. So Now we get some comments in the group after just crickets. The first guy comes out in support of me. He says, I respect the double down in the face of adversity. Bravo. Let's read about money, boys. The next guy comments and says, that was a huge double down with Swiss banking and blockchain, but I do admire your dedication and willingness to put your preferences out there. A third guy kind of comes in and says, maybe everyone should read about money and cryptocurrency, but it doesn't mean that they want it as the only option. The original options still remain on the table, but I'm going to throw a few fiction options out there too, all for the vote. So they post all of my things, and they add in 3 fiction books, none of which seemed very interesting to me. And we kind of go down this thread here. And then Mac, the guy that was DMing me, he also posts in the actual group, and he says, next month I'm making book club a dictatorship again. Democracy is broken. So again, like, I don't know if he's just sour grapes or what, if he doesn't want to read finance, or if people are actually privately saying, what's up? Like, we don't want to do this. Maybe they are. I'm a little bit skeptical. But he goes on to say that I made a great point. Book club started off about reading outside your comfort zones, and I've read many books outside my comfort zone and learned from every single one. Thank you for dropping the gauntlet and challenging us. Another supporter asked for the ranking of books by page number and length of the audio. And so someone posts the page numbers. Check Your Financial Privilege has the least amount of pages. So it ends up getting 5 votes, and everything else has no votes so far. But I do come to find out that this Mac guy is the one who started this book club. There's also this old sci-fi fantasy reader channel that has many of the active book club members in it, but it hasn't had much activity in the last 2 or 3 years or so that I've been in F3. So I don't know any of the history of it all, but I'm skeptical a little bit that Mac was told by others they don't want to read about money, although I don't doubt it. It's definitely possible. But I don't know. I think he definitely doesn't want to. But I get the group participation and all that. And I will say, at the book club, I was standing in line to grab lunch yesterday with one of the guys in the book club. They'd made a comment about, well, we just did a self help book. I'd love to read a fiction. And I kind of looked at him and it's like, well, I can't help you there. And it was already kind of known that I was going to be the next guy. And I asked him, how do you feel about economics? And he's like, there's a place we go to read about economics. It's called a university, and was joking around and all that stuff. This other guy piped up and he was like, wait, so you're going to put out some options, right? And I'm like, yeah, I've been waiting to read some of these books, hoping that I could share them with book club. And I wanted to put out these options. And he was like, wait, you've got 4 finance econ books? And I was like, yep, that's what I like to read about. And he just looked at me like I was crazy. So I'm gonna wrap this up. That was my experience about wreaking havoc on book club. I think I'll get 5 readers of this book, counting myself, probably a couple others. Most of the men in this group, I will say, are likely pretty well off, live in an affluent area, probably don't have any major financial struggles, and just want an escape from the grind of their work and their family life. It's so hard. Yeah, I know. I'm making fun a little bit. I don't know a ton of these guys super well in the book club, but I know some of them a little. And, I wear Bitcoin branded shirts to workouts, and people ask about it every once in a while. When people ask what I do, I start with my podcast and then I mention my day job after I mention my podcast. And the whole reason I have this podcast is not to get rich off all the big podcast money and have the most popular podcast in the world about Bitcoin. The whole reason I have this podcast is just to tell people that I have a podcast, because then they ask what it's about. And I say Bitcoin and finance. And hopefully, if I become their friend, if they have a question about it, they just know that, hey, well, he has a podcast. He must know something about it. I can ask him. So that's my hope. And this is going to lead into my next episode. But I go around in life much of the time and I see the choices that people make financially, from buying uh, cars that are too new or too expensive, too decked out, from buying too much house and becoming house poor, just financing things, financing couches, and just all sorts of stuff. I mean, not to say that I haven't made dumb financial choices, because I have, but by and large, I have avoided all of the major pitfalls. But my point is that I feel like I care about people's money more than they care about it. I care more about other people's finances more than they care about it. Yeah, it's hard to convey what I'm saying exactly, but um, I just feel for people. I want people to be secure. I want people to be happy, and that's maybe the hard part about why I'm getting so much pushback about a finance book and book club, and particularly Bitcoin, is because I'm in my mid 30s. A lot of the guys I was talking with are also in their mid 30s, some in their 20s, but a lot in the book club are probably, I would say, 40 to 50. So again, Bitcoin's not going to really appeal. But at this point, it does look like Alex Gladstein's Check Your Financial Privilege is going to be the number one pick with 5 votes and everything else having none. We'll see if we can get a few more people to join in and actually read the book. I haven't read it, but from reading some of the Amazon reviews, it seems like it's kind of like a brief overview of Bitcoin and the petrodollar system, which I'm sure Alex will explain really simply and easily so that we can all understand that. It's not going to go over our heads too much, I don't think. But then he just tells about dictatorships and stories about how people sidestepped dictators and authoritarians and despots and were able to secure themselves, protect themselves with Bitcoin in these third world countries, and just the struggles and the hardships that these people have to go through. Um, his book, Hidden Repression, I'm going to say it, it made me cry. The amount of human suffering that has been caused by central banking, by inflation, by the IMF and the World Bank, and people losing half of their life savings overnight or more over the course of time, literally wasting their life's work. It's being stolen from them. When I was reading that book, just the gravity and the amount of human suffering that has come from these unjust financial systems hit me like a ton of bricks. And yeah, I cried. It's such a huge amount of suffering, a huge amount of devastation to local economies, to family, to culture, to all these things that affect these people. So anyway, I really hope that we get this book, that people will take a risk on it. It's like 11-hour listen, maybe 12-hour listen on Audible. If you listen fast, you'll be done in 6 to 8 hours probably. But yeah, I really hope people take the chance, and I think they'll find that it's way better than they expected. At least that's what I'm expecting to find. And I already have high expectations for Alex Gladstein. His talk at Bitcoin conference this summer, the first talk, because he did two, I think, was broken into two parts. I'll link it in the show notes along with all the books that I mentioned and everything else, F3 info, everything I talked about that I can link to, I'll link. But anyway, his talk at Bitcoin conference was incredible. It was just so interesting and relatable, the stories of the communities he told. So if you have 25 minutes, I highly recommend it. It's an incredible thing that he's doing with the Human Rights Foundation. And it's amazing what Bitcoin can do to help these people too. So that's it. That's my show. I do want to thank OMG21BTC on Twitter. He sponsored me back in the spring. I think I still have a discount code active with him. So if you want to get a Keychain Bitcoin Lightning wallet that has a QR code that you can set up a static QR code that goes to a Lightning address, you can get a fixed Lightning address in Strike or in Fountain or a few other places. Anyway, it's a really cool way to demo Bitcoin to people, just to show them how easy it is, and also to replace your business cards with that NFC chip that's in there. You can customize and have it go to your business website. You can have it go to your LinkedIn. You can have it go to your Facebook page. You can have it go wherever you want it to go. But really great product. And so I'll make sure my code is still there and put that in the show notes as well. But thanks for listening. Remember that financial independence is doable, and I'll be back with you soon. For real. I'm going to try not to take many breaks this fall and into the winter. So talk to y'all later.